Christian music makes me really mad these days. And the reason that I put Christian in air quotes is because a lot of it is kind of like not really worship, not really biblical, but because they kind of vaguely mention God, or it's just kind of implied that they're talking about God, it can be considered Christian. So I've been having a really hard time finding good, theologically sound Christian worship music that actually worships the Lord, which sounds like a crazy thing, but it is actually really difficult to find these days. I remember before I had done a ton of research on the topic and really kind of confirmed a lot of my bad feelings about Christian worship music, I just went for a really long time where I just didn't listen to any, and it made me feel really bad. I felt like, wow, why do I not want to worship the Lord? Why do I not want to do this? Why do I get like kind of a sick feeling in my chest, a sick feeling in my stomach when I am listening to these songs or singing along to these songs? Like it just didn't feel right to me. Not only do I believe that a lot of these Christian songs are bad theologically, they're talking about way too much about ourselves rather than God. They're not really truly worshiping. But I also have had one time when I was listening to K-Love. I don't remember what exactly the song was about, but this guy was basically talking about his daughter having an addiction to something and it really messing her up. And I just remember on K-Love, like they censored it and made him talk about something really vague and really, I guess like G-rated, but that just completely takes all the power out of things. Like the Bible, in case you didn't know, talks about a lot of stuff that's pretty graphic. And I think that stuff is meant to be taught to our kids. We're supposed to relate really serious issues in our world. We're supposed to bring those to our kids and help them to see it through a biblical lens, show them the actual world. That's kind of a side tangent, but I'm kind of fed up with a lot of the Christian music that's out there right now. One of the biggest issues, I believe, with Christian worship music is the really faulty doctrine. And that kind of stems from not basing our worship off of the Bible, like Psalms or different other things that you can kind of like, you can see how the Lord wants us to worship him. We can see through the Bible all of the qualities of the Lord that we are supposed to praise, all of the things that we're supposed to say about God. And then you have people saying things like that God is like, that he's like desperate for us, or, like one of the things that I was talking to somebody about that they really cannot stand is that a lot of Christian music, you can't tell the difference between worship and like a secular love song. And if you can't tell the difference between those two things, that's a pretty good sign that it's not really worship. One of the church groups that really does an interesting or bad job of this, in my opinion, is Bethel Music. And Bethel has gotten a whole lot of blowback for just being really interesting theologically. They have a lot of teachings that I believe are false teachings. Hillsong United, Elevation. That might have offended a lot of people that I listed those churches in there, but their doctrine in particular, not in particular, in both their worship and in their preaching is really faulty. Another really big issue with worship music today is the me, my, I kind of attitude about worship. A lot of it isn't praising God for his qualities, praising God for the wonderful things that he's done, things that you see throughout worship in the Bible. There is no need through worship to bring any sort of attention to ourselves. We don't need to talk about ourselves in worship. We can definitely, I totally believe in talking about difficult times that we had, talking about struggles that the Lord got us through. I think that all that stuff is really, really beautiful stuff. But any song that talks about I, me, myself more than it does talk about God, if you're labeling that song worship, if you're labeling that song Christian music, I think that you have to be really careful in that circumstance. And it really wouldn't even be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that they slap that Christian label on songs. I would much rather that some of these artists not specifically label themselves Christian artists or specifically label their songs as worship songs or just Christian songs, because if you are going to do that, if you are going to dedicate something to the Lord, it needs to be really worship. It needs to be about magnifying Him. Just like if you're a pastor and outside of the church, you talk about regular everyday life things other than just specifically talking about the Bible and theology, that's okay. But as soon as you start standing up on the stage and preaching sermons on things that are entirely unbiblical, that aren't based on the faith, then that's where it's unacceptable, in my opinion. The same thing with these songs. If they're going to say that they're worship songs, say that they're Christians and that they're pointing people to Christ with their music, that their doctrine, their theology is sound, then you have to really make sure that that's the case. You can't say one thing about your song and then do something completely different. Another reason that I have not been listening to any of these songs from these churches in particular is because any sort of support that we give to these churches points people to their teaching, points people to their doctrine and theology. I really truly believe that the most dangerous thing and one of the best tactics that Satan has for throwing people off and for making people just lost is not just outwardly being evil, like just like obvious, like a sign that like points to you and that says, you know, look here, like I'm evil. Evil! No, instead, Satan wants to get you so close to the truth, really, really close to the truth, but he wants to tweak a few different things and make everything a little bit more about me and a little bit less about God. And he wants to get you in a permanent place of lukewarmness, a permanent place of not understanding theology. And so a lot of these churches, like an Elevation, like Bethel, you know, some of these churches that are kind of word of faith, they are very close to the truth in a lot of areas. And there are some issues that they definitely get right. But the really important parts of the gospel, they don't get right. They don't preach the entire truth. And we're looking for people to be attracted and following the whole truth. And so supporting songs like that, spreading that kind of movement is really, really dangerous and something that I don't want to do. So I'm not going to listen to those songs. I mean, I wouldn't listen to them anyway, but that's just another reason not to listen to their songs. So, Sam, you might be asking, what exactly is good worship music? What can I listen to? I mean, Bethel, Elevation, Hillsong, those songs are literally everywhere. If you look up worship music on YouTube, they're probably like the top 99 out of 100 results on search. Well, there are definitely lots of artists out there that are very, very biblically based. In fact, there are some artists that will straight up only sing things from Psalms or only sing things from other places in the Bible where it specifically lays out how to worship if you really feel like being safe. But we can also just determine whether something is real, good, theologically sound worship by just weighing things and comparing things to God's quality in the Bible. So if your worship music is saying that God like desperately needs us or, you know, anything along those lines, you can know that is not theologically sound whatsoever. I also wanted to take this opportunity to just shout out Dennis Perckeci and his brother Michaelo. They are going by the Two Witnesses right now, and they are making a lot of really, really good theologically sound Christian music. It's kind of in the rap genre, so if that's not really your thing, then I understand. But for me, someone that does listen to that kind of stuff, their music is really, really refreshing, and you can always trust that it's really biblical and theologically sound. I recommend that you give them a look. Anyway, guys, that's just been a little bit of my experience looking for good, godly, theologically sound worship music. If you have any sort of recommendations on music that I could listen to of any sort of genre, just go ahead and leave those down below in the comment section, and I would love to check those songs out and potentially add them to my worship playlist. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching. I love every single one of you, and I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.